And your social security check.
Thing unbelievable. Brought 100 people to camp beside it. Champagne, fairy lights, three-tier cake, the works. One small problem. She picked the wrong pond. See, when you run 50 bulls and horses, waste has to go somewhere. And on a century-old ranch, things flow in ways city folks don't expect. What happened next made headlines 3 states over. Think your HOA is bad? Drop your state below. This story will make yours look tame. It started on a Tuesday morning when I found a letter in my mailbox, typed on HOA letterhead so crisp you could cut yourself on it. Dear Mr. Thompson, it read, the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association requests your cooperation in sharing usage of the water feature adjacent to our property line for the beautification of our community. I had to read it 3 times before the audacity really sank in. Water feature? That was my pond, built by my grandfather's own hands, sitting on land my family had owned since before these McMansions were even a gleam in some developer's eye. I was still shaking my head when I heard the click-clack of heels on my gravel driveway. There she was, Carol Martinez, HOA president, marching toward me like she owned the place. He carried a clipboard in one hand and a measuring tape in the other, wearing a white pantsuit so pristine it looked like she'd never encountered actual dirt in her life. The universe has a sense of humor, though, because the moment she stepped off the driveway, her designer heel found the one fresh chicken dropping my hens had left as a welcome gift. I watched her face contort as she tried to maintain her composure, scraping her shoe on my grass while pretending nothing happened. Mr. Thompson, she said, flashing teeth so white they could signal aircraft. I trust you received our letter about the community water feature? I leaned against my fence post, taking my sweet time to answer. Ma'am, that's a ranch pond, not a community pool. Been in my family longer than your HOAs existed. She laughed, the kind of laugh that said she wasn't used to hearing the word no. Oh, I think you'll find that natural resources benefit everyone. Your pond would look so much better with a fountain, some benches, maybe a gazebo, and of course, without all the rural elements. The rural elements, I knew she meant me. The pond stays as is, I said, simply. It's part of a working ranch. Carol's smile tightened like a guitar string about to snap. I need to speak to your manager, she said, then caught herself. Oh wait, you don't have one. How quaint. She pulled out her measuring tape and actually started measuring the distance from my fence to the water's edge, jotting notes on her clipboard like she was surveying her own property. You know, she said, not looking up, I grew up next to a ranch. I know all about the smells, the noise, the unpleasantness. That's why I worked so hard to get where I am today, to get away from all that. There was something in her voice, a hint of old, wrapped in new arrogance. This pond, it's different. It's beautiful. Wasted on. She gestured vaguely at my work boots and faded jeans. All this. I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my voice level. Ma'am, I'm gonna have to ask you to get off my property now. She clicked her pen closed with theatrical precision. I was trying to be nice, Mr. Thompson. Bad choice, cowboy. She turned on a freshly soiled heel and marched back to her white SUV, somehow managing to make even her retreat look threatening. But Carol didn't know she just declared war on the wrong farmer. On that run, Carol, you already know she done messed up. See, what Carol didn't understand was that she wasn't the first person to try to push my family around. My granddad faced down developers in the 70s. My dad fought off corporate farms in the 90s, and now it was my turn. The difference was, I had something they didn't. 50 years of accumulated knowledge about every inch of this land, including some secrets that would make Carol wish she'd never set her manicured foot on my property. As her SUV disappeared down the road, I looked at my pond, my beautiful, clean pond, with its lily pads and clear water that reflected the sky like a mirror. Then I looked past the trees to where the other pond sat, hidden from view, the one we didn't talk about at dinner parties, the one that served a very specific purpose on a working ranch. And for the first time in years, I smiled, thinking about that old pond. Carol wanted to play games. Well, I knew exactly which cards to deal. The HOA didn't waste any time. 3 days after Carol's visit, I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. Through my bedroom window, I could see a landscaping crew setting up what looked like industrial-grade sprinkler systems along the property line. Not just any sprinklers. These were the kind golf courses use, capable of shooting water 50 feet or more. By the time I pulled on my boots and made it outside, they were already testing the system. Morning, gentlemen, I called out, keeping my tone friendly. Help you with something? The crew chief, a sunburned guy named Mike, looked uncomfortable. Just installing some irrigation for the HOA, sir, for their new landscaping project. That's when I noticed Carol's white SUV parked across the street, her silhouette visible behind the tinted windows. Those sprinklers looked mighty powerful, I observed. Sure they're pointed the right direction? Mike glanced nervously at the SUV. We're just following the work order, sir. The first test came that afternoon. I was working on the fence when the sprinklers kicked on with a mechanical whir. Water arced high into the air, and wouldn't you know it, a sudden breeze carried the spray right onto my property. My tool shed, my truck, and half my vegetable garden got an unexpected shower. But here's the thing about karma. Sometimes it works faster than you expect. The wind shifted, and those powerful sprinklers sent a wall of water right back at the HOA's side. I heard tires squeal and looked up to see Carol's white SUV getting absolutely drenched, water streaming down her windshield as she frantically tried to escape the spray zone. I couldn't help but chuckle as she drove off, her car looking like it had just gone through the world's most aggressive car wash. But my amusement died the next morning when I walked out to check on my mother's rose garden. The heritage roses she'd planted 40 years ago, varieties you couldn't find anymore, were drowning in pools of standing water. The constant spray had flooded their bed, and several plants were already showing signs of root rot. These weren't just flowers, they were living memories, each bush planted for a special occasion. The yellow ones for my parents' anniversary, the red ones for my birth, the white ones for my grandmother's passing. Now they were dying, one by one, victims of Carol's petty water war. I knelt in the mud trying to save what I could, my hands black with soil as I dug drainage channels. That's when I found it. Piece of old paper, laminated and buried near the largest rose bush, part of a blueprint that looked like, with my grandfather's handwriting in the margins. Tom Bradley appeared at my fence line, coffee mug in hand. At 70 years old, Tom was one of the original residents, back before Meadowbrook became an HOA. He'd known my grandfather, had helped him build some of the ranch structures. "Rough morning, son," he said, watching me work. "Heard about the new sprinkler system. Carol's idea, no doubt." I showed him the damaged roses, and his face darkened. "Your mother would be heartbroken. These roses meant everything to her." He paused, studying my face. "You got that look, Liam. Same look your granddad had when the county tried to force that highway through here. What are you thinking?" I held up the piece of blueprint I'd found. "I'm thinking granddad might have left me more than just land and memories." Tom leaned closer, squinting at the faded lines. "Is that what I think it is?" Before I could answer, his expression turned serious. "Boy, don't do nothing stupid, but also, don't do nothing." Carol's been pushing people around for 5 years now. Made me cut down my apple tree because it was attracting bees. Like bees are a bad thing. I spent the rest of the day trying to salvage the roses, replanting what I could, building up berms to redirect the water. The landscaping company had given me a quote, $3,000 to restore the heritage garden. $3,000 I didn't have for damage I didn't cause. As the sun set, I sat on my porch, that piece of blueprint in my hands. It showed part of a water system, pipes and valves, dated 1968. There was more to find. I was sure of it. My grandfather had been a meticulous man, a planner. He wouldn't have left just one piece. That night I made a decision. Carol wanted to play water games? Fine, but she picked the wrong pond to mess with. Comment below what state you're watching from, because what happens next might be illegal in yours. Just kidding. Or in mine. The thing about old farms is they're full of secrets. Drainage systems, underground pipes, connections that aren't on any modern survey. My grandfather had built this place when regulations were different, when a handshake was a contract and a man's word meant something. I'd start looking for the rest of those blueprints. Because something told me Granddad had prepared for this exact situation, even if he never imagined someone like Carol would come along. That evening, Carol posted on her social media page a photo of my pond taken from her property line with the caption, "Future site of Meadowbrook Community Pool, making our neighborhood beautiful, one improvement at a time." Within an hour, the comments section had turned into a battleground. "That's not yours, Karen," someone wrote. Another added, "Pretty sure that's private property," but Carol's supporters quickly drowned them out with hearts and thumbs up emojis, already planning their pool parties and sunset gatherings by the water. Tom showed me the post on his phone the next morning, shaking his head. "She's already claiming victory," he said, "getting folks excited about something that ain't hers to give." We stood by my fence, looking out at the pond in question. The morning sun made the water sparkle like diamonds, lily pads floating serenely on the surface. A great blue heron stood motionless in the shallows, waiting for breakfast to swim by. pond really was beautiful, I had to admit. Granddad had positioned it perfectly to catch the morning light. The willows he'd planted along the far edge had grown into a living curtain that swayed in the slightest breeze. 3 generations of Thompson kids had learned to swim in that water, myself included. I can still remember summer afternoons when Mom would bring out lemonade, and we'd spend hours floating on inner tubes, watching clouds drift by. Those were simpler times, before developers started buying up the land around us, before the county started talking about progress and community development. Now Carol wanted to turn those memories into some kind of suburban water feature, complete with safety regulations and probably a lifeguard schedule. The thought made my stomach turn. "You know what you ought to do?" Tom said suddenly, a glint in his eye. "Give her exactly what she deserves. Let her and her fancy friends find out what ranch life really smells like." He gestured toward the pond. "One good dose of reality from that water, and she'll be running back to her HOA meetings faster than you can say property lines." I let out a long sigh. The kind that comes from knowing something nobody else does. "Can't do it, Tom." He turned to me, eyebrows raised. "Why the hell not? It's your pond." I picked up a stick and tossed it into the water, watching the ripples spread. "Because that's the clean pond. Spring-fed, filtered through limestone. Probably the cleanest water in the county." Tom's tongue slumped in flames. "Wait, what?" I pointed past the stand of cottonwood trees toward the back of my property. "The waste pond is way over there, behind those trees. That's where all the runoff from the barn and pastures goes. This one," I gestured at the pretty pond Carol coveted, "this one's cleaner than her bottled water. The state actually tested it 5 years ago when they were doing a county-wide water quality survey. The report came back showing mineral content that would make spring water companies jealous. The limestone aquifer that fed it acted as a natural filtration system, and the pond's ecosystem was perfectly balanced. We had freshwater mussels cleaning the water, native plants oxygenating it, and a whole food chain that kept everything in harmony. The waste pond, on the other hand, was exactly what you'd expect on a working ranch. It collected runoff from the barn, the corrals, and the pastures where 50 head of cattle and a dozen horses did their business. It was functional, necessary, and definitely not somewhere you'd want to take a swim. The smell alone on a hot day could peel paint, and that was when the wind was favorable. Tom stared at me like I'd just told him the earth was flat. "So you're telling me she's fighting tooth and nail for your clean pond, and you're just gonna let her take it?" But even as he said it, I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. He'd known my grandfather, after all. "Unless," he started, then stopped himself. I pulled out the piece of blueprint I'd been carrying in my pocket, smoothing it against the fence post. "Granddad was smarter than people gave him credit for. This show's part of an overflow system, connects the 2 ponds underground." Tom studied the faded lines, tracing them with one weathered finger. "Emergency drainage," he murmured. "In case of flooding. Brilliant." I dropped another stick in the pond, but this time I aimed for a specific spot near the edge. We both watched as it swirled in a slow circle before being pulled towards something beneath the surface. "There's an intake valve down there," I said quietly. "Sealed for 50 years, according to the date on this paper." "She made me cut down my apple tree," Tom said after a long pause. 30-year-old tree my wife planted? Said it was attracting bees, creating a nuisance. You know what she replaced it with? Nothing, just grass. Useless, water-wasting grass." His voice carried years of resentment. "Then she went after the Johnsons' vegetable garden. Said it was bringing down property values, made them tear it all out." He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the fighter he must have been as a younger man. "If you got a way to teach her a lesson, legal-like, I won't say a word against it." As if summoned by our conversation, a courier arrived with an envelope bearing the HOA seal. Inside was an invitation on cardstock so thick it could double as a roof shingle. "Moonlight soiree by the pond," it read in flowing script. "Join us for an evening of elegance as we celebrate our newest community amenity." The date was set for next weekend. Carol had even included a little map showing community members where to park on my access road. I studied the invitation more closely. She'd had it professionally designed, complete with gold foil accents and a watercolor illustration of my pond. At the bottom, in tiny print, it read, "Hosted by the Meadowbrook Community Association, for the benefit of all residents." Not a single mention that the pond was on private property. The sheer audacity.
Fuck this game.